Welcome to Season 3 of the Builders Podcast. I'm Matt Levenhagen. Here we share the journeys, strategies, and lessons that help entrepreneurs build what's next. Builders helping builders. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined again by Joel Solomon. I think this is his 6th appearance on the show over the years. Welcome back to the show, Joel.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure and an honor to be here again, Matt.
Wow. Pleasure and honor to have you. So we have something a little bit different to talk about today. We're going to get into building something. Before I do that, but just for those that don't know who Joel is, he is a master prosperity coach, mindful money and finance expert. He is an author, TEDx speaker. He is a former hedge fund guy, and that's going to tie into kind of what we're talking about today a little bit. But all those things and probably much more. So, yeah, he knows what he's a pretty smart guy. That's why we keep having him back. What are we going to get into today, Joel? We're going to talk about something you're building. Let's introduce that kind of this idea that you sparked.
So, yes, I'm a former hedge fund manager, prosperity coach, mindful money expert, finance expert, and I've been teaching my clients how to change their money mindset and either grow their business or invest. And as a hedge fund manager, I invested in stocks. And so I've been teaching my 5-step proprietary stock screen, which is in my second book, The 9 Money Rules Millionaires Use, for the last 8 years. And last year, I joined a speaker coaching program. As you mentioned, I'm a TEDx speaker, and I also want to help at least 100,000 people become financially free. And I've been moving towards that goal slowly, but I realized a couple of years ago after doing my TEDx that I need to get on more stages. I need to speak more in front of larger groups so that I can help at least 100,000 people. So I joined the speaker coaching program, and her first challenge to us, because her program is done for you. So she coaches a speaker coaching program, and it includes your speech. It includes getting on 4 stages. It includes your speaker reel, which is basically cut up speeches that you put on your website and you can use to send to event planners and speaker brokers to get on stages. And then they also create speaker testimonials. So when I speak, there's people in the audience. They then interview them after I speak, and that becomes a speaker testimonial reel that I also can put on my website and also send out. All this is done for you. And so I said, so she challenged us in the first month to have a done for you program in our own business if you didn't have one already. And I didn't.
Okay.
Everything I was doing was teaching a process, teaching mindset, teaching manifestation technique, teaching investing. And so the first thing that I came up with was, and the easiest thing for me to create a done for you program for is the process that I teach people how to invest in stocks. It's a 5-step stock screen, and it creates price targets. And so I then spent the last few weeks in May into June rolling out a new program, the Invest Smart Engine, in 2025, May into June of 2025, and said, "Hey, I don't need to teach you this." I reached out to hundreds of people and I said, "I don't need to teach this to you anymore. You can just get the results." And by the way, these results have been phenomenal. We've averaged over 56% annual return for the last 8 years. Matt, do you know the average stock market return over the last 8 years?
Probably like 10 or 15.
Yeah, exactly. It's about 11%. So we've outperformed by 45% over the last 8
Wow.
years using this process.
Do we have to legally say this is not guaranteed results?
No guarantees of past performance is no guarantee of future results, of course. And it's repeatable. It's a proven, repeatable process. And so I wanted to figure out a way to get this in the hands of more people. And so doing it for them and sending them the results and say, there's no recommendations here. It's just these are the stocks that pass to the screen. These are the stocks that we believe have at least 80% return over the next 1 to 2 years. You decide out of these, you know, I'm sending 1 or 2 or 5 a week, which ones you want to invest in. And rule number 9 in my book, The 9 Money Rules Millionaires Use, is don't diversify. So I don't say, invest in all of them. Pick 5, 7, and
Hmm.
go with those. And so that's what I've created initially by hand. So I was doing all the work manually in May and June of last year. And
Yeah, that's kind of the problem with done for you because you have to do the
I'm
stuff
doing all
for
the work.
them.
So,
Yeah, it
but
doesn't scale.
so I said, yeah, it doesn't scale. So I said, you know what? Let's create a system. Let's create a program. Let me reach out to some people in my network. I mentor University of Rochester students as just part of giving back. And so I asked the guy I was mentoring last year through May if he knew anybody at the school who might want to put some good thing, some good program on their resume for future jobs. And so he said, what about me? So he started working on it and couldn't figure out exactly how to program all 5 steps. And
So kind of this pause here for a second. So you have the system, this process, and you've identified the piece of it that you could kind of automate and maybe have somebody code for you,
correct.
and because you weren't going to do the coding, you weren't going to. Although these days,
I could
AI.
probably, but yes and no. I've actually put it into ChatGPT. I said, here's the companies. It's an earnings related program. So it's based on companies reporting their earnings every quarter.
Hmm.
And so like right now, as we're recording this, we're in the midst of earnings season, the fourth quarter of 2025. Some weeks there's 500 companies reporting their earnings. So I can't do 500 by hand. So I would put the list into chat and say, and I put my parameters into chat GPT and I said, okay, which of these passed? And then, once it tells me, I do double check to make sure
Yeah.
that it's doing it correctly, sometimes not so correctly. And so
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
less,
you can't be 100% on ChatGPT. I had the other day, I have it process my transcripts. Basically I drop in a transcript. It gives me like the table of contents and like a show notes,
yeah.
but I have to review it. And I'm looking at the table of contents, for this last one. It had nothing to do with this episode at all. I said, "What did you do?" She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I was," and then like she has some excuse. Like, let me actually make it. I'm like, oh, thank goodness I read it. So yes, sorry. I had to
And
tell you
and
that.
it and I also found that it learns for a period and then unlearns.
Yeah.
So I could go we can go through the steps. They're very simple. They're in my book. It's public information. I've posted individual steps on TikTok and
Mhm.
Instagram, and people want to program it themselves, they can. 99% of the world won't, but some
Yeah.
people could. And so step 4 is to check if the earnings per share growth for the company in that quarter is greater than the price to earnings ratio. So PE, or the price to earnings ratio, can be calculated many different ways. And I explained to it how I wanted it calculated. And then put in the list of companies last week and said, do the screen. And it was calculating it an old way, not my definition, like some other definition of
Yeah.
PE. And I'm like, no, that's the conventional definition. That's not what I taught you. That's right. Yeah, I remember now.
Let me apologize.
Yeah,
Sometimes I think maybe it's just context. It just has too much context, or as time goes on, or it
right.
just hallucinates something. I don't know,
So,
but
so
yeah,
yeah, so
it's
the idea right now is I need to have a viable program that I hit a button and it tells me what stocks pass the screen and then which stocks have at least 80% upside over the next 1 to 2 years. A lot of the information on the second piece is based on the investment bank analyst estimates for the coming year. And that
Uh,
information is not widely available. It may be available on some sites, not on others. So it has to go out and find those sites. Sometimes it's not available on one site, but it's on available on another. It's not so straightforward as it sounds.
yeah, so you have to build logic in there that's going to go out to multiple sources, and whatever it can pull in from that one, then it kind of notes, oh, I don't have these, and so let me try to find that elsewhere. And yeah, yeah, and that's going to be that's something that's solvable with software or some coded solution, but doing it all manual would be a nightmare.
Yeah, and I have been teaching my clients the last 8 years, and I'm quite
Hmm.
adept at it. And so, what may take some people a lot longer takes me seconds sometimes to see, okay, it's failed, it's failed, it's failed. Okay, this
Yeah,
one passed. And so I can rifle through 500 companies in a couple of
yeah,
hours, but I'd rather have hit a button and have it done in a second, not in hours.
gotcha.
And
So you
there's
found,
8 and there's
go ahead.
8,000 companies on the US stock market, and we're looking, and some of my clients wanted I had a UK client over last summer, and she wanted to look at international companies. I'm like, "This works for any company.
Mhm.
We'll look at European companies."
Okay, so you found a guy, and how did you vet this person?
No vetting. He was my mentee
Is
at
your
at
mentee?
at during, a program that, the semester, in the
But
spring of 2025.
but you had some idea that he was capable of doing something,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I have his resume. We worked together
Yeah,
weekly for months, and I
yeah,
didn't know his programming expertise, but I knew that he was, a smart kid, and
yeah,
he's going to my alma mater, so probably s- pretty pre- pretty smart to begin with if he got in
yeah.
there. So yeah, so he was able to program it mostly, but there was a couple of steps where the information was not widely available. So we had to do those steps manually. And so that was the first iteration. And then I was in London last year, and there was actually a university student in London who came to my presentation that I gave. And so we kept up every few months, and I mentioned to him, "Hey, I've been working with this guy. You're at university. You may know somebody." He's, "Oh yeah, I do know somebody." And so he introduced me to somebody else who programmed it. The first piece, the screen without the price targets. So that was also quite helpful, but not all the way to where I need to go. So we're
So
still in the midst of, figuring out a whole system where I could just hit a button and get the list.
so how do you like how do you put the you got the requirements, and the person that's coding it, do they do before they even start coding the stuff, do they do the research and figure out exactly, how they're going to do it? Like, do they sketch it out for you? Do you have meetings? Do you like how what does that process look like when you're dealing with somebody that's going to code something for you?
Great question. I haven't had a process because it's been not so easy to find people who are
Mm.
capable, willing, interested, yeah, all those pieces, right? So it's been more of uh, not so much a vetting process, but a accepting process.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
I mean, it sounds like you're leaning on your network to find, you're kind of through conversations, you're finding
right,
people,
yeah.
and which, what do you think the benefit is there? You want to work with somebody you trust, and um, yeah, what's the thought process instead of like
Yeah,
going out
you
and
could go
finding it?
to Fiverr, Upwork, and get someone who, may or may not be credible and do the work. And starting with somebody who I know, like, and trust already is a better way to start. For me, I have a pretty wide network, including you. And
Uh-huh.
so that is very helpful, right? And so for me, like I don't know about you, but I get spam emails almost daily, sometimes 10 in a day for from service providers of all types. You know, could be digital marketing, it could be coaches, it could be legal, you know, all types of things. And especially because I'm a former hedge fund manager, sometimes they still think I am. They don't look at LinkedIn or anything, and they'll send me stuff related to, you know, being a hedge fund manager. Like, oh, we want to buy your business, or like, can we value a piece of this, or and you know, so that also a lot of spam, and they don't know me and
Yeah.
I don't know them, and so I just don't do business with people I don't know.
That's why I asked. I think that's actually um a really good position to take because I mean, so I've dealt with a lot of people. Obviously, I'm in web development, and I've dealt with a lot of agencies and people over the years, and I've seen a lot of failed efforts. And a lot of it stems to, like, oh, we outsourced to this team in India or something, and like, I got good people in India, part of my team, I mean, that I rely on, but I built that relationship with them for years. And so, and like those relationships, I mean, they can build in different ways, but even like agencies I work with and help and partner with, it didn't just, there's probably an experimental stage, let's try a few projects together, but it's about building that relationship and figuring out, but there's always something that's going to lead into that maybe you were referred to them, or they see your content, or they've gotten to know you in some manner that opens that door. But like you did, like you have a large network, people and stuff. And, and we were had a conversation, and you told me, actually, we were talking about coming back on a podcast. You told me what you were doing. I'm like, well, this is the world I live in. Maybe I can, help you too. But that's just it. Like you build these networks, not just to get business it's to know people and get referred to people and stuff like that. So I think that's a really, know, like, and trust is a huge, huge factor. But it doesn't necessarily always still pan out. but, but it's better than, like I said, I know a lot of nightmare stories over the years where I'm thinking of somebody right now, a client that they have this it's a huge e-commerce business, and they're scaling up, and they hired a team but this is like the second or third effort to try to get something built, and it failed multiple times. I don't know how they're doing. I haven't checked in with them for a while, but it's hard to get stuff built, especially if it's a complex system. This is a little bit, not hugely complex, but it's still, there's always things that, like, if you start building something, and that's why I ask about process and requirements, and going through the initial discovery process of figuring out how you're going to do things. I mean, when I build something, I try to, I don't just say, I'm going to go do it. I have to be like, I'll come back to you, and we'll figure out the best way to do it, best solution, if it can even be done. But sometimes you don't figure it out until you're deep into it, that, oh, okay, that API doesn't work the way we thought it would work, or there's some wrench that's thrown into the works that we
Right.
didn't anticipate. But then you have to solve those problems. But software development, any kind of development, and I've talked to people that have been building software for years, and it's like, you solve one problem, then you solve the next problem, and that's kind of how it works. You take a piece, you build this piece, and then you figure out how to build that piece. And but that's where you're at. You've built some of the pieces, but there's still some that need to be built. So you worked with this next individual. He got you to another stage, and where are you at now with things?
So, I think we either need to build on what was done already or start from scratch.
Yeah.
And the reason is because the person who built the last iteration is not available.
So
And
that can happen
so,
too. Yeah. I mean, you lose the thread, and well, that's something too. That's something with experience, right? I mean, that's, you have, especially if you're giving all the trust to somebody else, that and you don't have the coding experience, and this is another hard thing for anybody to get software done or something. You don't have the coding experience. You don't know when they say, I'm going to build it in this language or whatever. You're like, okay, I'm going to put it on GitHub. What's GitHub?
Right.
But you don't know that, oh, I should have access to that, or I should have a backup of that somewhere else, or I should do these other things. Even though, I mean, and this is true in business, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you want to trust people. You want to, believe that everything's going to work out. But, over time, you got to realize, well, it doesn't always. Things
Right.
happen. Or,
Yeah.
but anyway, so what are the big lessons? I mean, maybe I named a few, but what
Yeah,
are
you
some of the
did. I
big
think having
lessons?
having backup, I think, you know, maybe like you said earlier, putting the specs together, the steps that need to get done up front. And then there's less misunderstanding because in the latest iteration, it was, wait, I thought I was done after I do just the 5-step screen. I'm not sure where you got that from, but we discussed 5 steps plus price targets.
Hmm.
Right. And so, just writing all the steps out and having it documented is probably upfront before you get started is probably a little bit more helpful. And then also seeing what potential roadblocks there could be throughout the stages, right? Because this particular project, we need to get data, and is all the data available freely, or do you require a subscription to some data service every month, and do you require access to a API service like API ninjas or something like that every month? So what are, and what's the investment there?
Yep.
And knowing that all up front before you actually start the project rather than just jumping in, which is what I've done. I mean, not the programmer did
Yeah.
without like laying out all the specs the first couple times.
Because I mean, planning a project is, I mean, you can have a really good programmer, but maybe they're not, you know, everyone's somewhat rounded in different ways. There maybe they haven't done a project like this before and they don't know even all the questions to ask or figure out. Well, one of the things like too, what could happen, I've seen this happen is, and I think this is probably, gosh, this is probably so common, is that a programmer takes on a project and then the scope of that project is way bigger than they anticipated. And they're
Yeah.
sinking a lot more hours into it than they anticipated. And they realize maybe at some point, maybe I should just cut my ties and run for the hills because because they have lives, they have other projects, they have things they're doing. And suddenly this one's, like, oh my God, what did I get into? So things like that can happen. I think the other thing too is, I mean, we've all heard of things like, minimal viable products and things like that, which means just, building something simple first, vetting that, like taking that, putting that in people's hands and, and then building on it if, based on feedback and all that, just getting something done. And so when you're talking about phases and stages, and that's another way you could construct it. Like you could, let's build this piece. Like I'm talking about building pieces. Let's solve this. Okay. That's already valuable. That's saving me time in this arena, this area. Okay. I can use that in different ways or they can. And now let's build the next piece. So if any piece fails, you still haven't lost the whole thing. Like you're not trying to build the whole thing at once. You're building it in stages, or you decide like, oh, let's build the first 2, 3 stages and then get that in their hand. But so there's ways you could do that too, where then regardless of you, and plus you get it's easier to target and set goals around that, right? You can you can say something's finished and then, okay, now let's build out next piece and scope that out. But Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of ways things can go sideways, and as you're learning, but that's what I love about this podcast. It's not all about the clean wins. It's about, I mean, you didn't do anything wrong necessarily. It's just, it's just part of the game. Even when you know, like, and trust somebody, if you don't have, especially if you yourself don't have experience, that's why a lot of, like, founders and stuff try to find somebody, they got to find the technical founder, somebody that has that experience, or whatever. That's yeah, it's a whole thing. So, but at this stage of the game, how you feeling about it?
I'm excited. I know that once we're finished, we will have a service that is able to help people compound their money much quicker than they have been.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm excited about, getting something in people's hands and at a reasonable investment that they can, compound their money and get closer to financial freedom quicker.
Well, I think what's beautiful about it is it's not like you're building something that's not, you don't have anything to point to that it doesn't work. Like, you have probably
Years
people
of
that can,
experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
I have
yourself, years
video
of experience,
testimonials too. Video
testimonials, you
testimonials.
have all that stuff is already there. So you're just building something to, so it's not going to be a hard sell, I don't think.
No, it
And
sells itself, actually.
yeah, and then once you build something like that, you'll have more ideas.
Right, right,
You can,
right.
like I say, you're building it, minimal viable, but then you might have more ideas for features, or think other ways you can help people, or other
Make
things
an
you can
app
build.
out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And and the done for you situation is very
Huge.
cool.
Yeah, it's huge. I
Um,
mean, just like this, the speaker program is huge because now I have my keynote speech.
oh, yeah, when you said that, I'm like, that's because I mean, I've been on stage, but no one was like cutting my stuff up or giving me, and that was years ago in a whole different phase of Matt's life. But yeah, I was actually just thinking, I was like going to go back to one of the seminars I was at. I was speaking. I just wanted to show that I spoke once on a stage in front of like 1,000 people one time.
Right?
But I could say I
Huge.
did it.
Yeah.
But to have somebody do that for you, it's because it's not, I think this is actually, this is a nice little add to this conversation. It's like, there's so many things we do and that we don't maximize, in that afterwards we did it and we forget about it. But that's something that you could either clip or get testimonials from, and all the stuff we're talking about here. But anything, there's all kinds of things you can do with stuff. It's not just something that just happened one time, and so you can find ways to put it out there, even,
Actually talking
content
about
wise.
that, Matt, since I was on the show last, I hired somebody to clip up my podcast interviews. So what we do is, so I'm on this podcast, and once it comes out, I'll if you're okay with it, I'll get the video. I'll have my VA clip it up into 30 different clips, and we'll post for 30 days over the month after the podcast comes out. And so on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And so you and I are getting more visibility from one 30-minute. It's out there for many, many, a month or even more. And I've been doing this since last May. And so the podcast interviewers love this because their podcasts are not getting out once, they're getting out 20 to 30 or 40 times and on 5 different platforms. And so they're getting more visibility. I'm getting more visibility. And like yeah, it's not just once, it's out there. And then people can see the clip. And if they're interested in the clip, oh, let me watch the whole thing now.
Preach. Let's get the word out. This is something that kind of, I don't know what to say if it bugs me, but I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often, because these interviews, I mean, some people just go from one interview to the next interview and next interview. They don't have a process like that to maximize the content and repost it. And yeah, we can give you the MP4 and we do that. I think it's hilarious. Sometimes I'm like be on my feed, like on LinkedIn or something. I'm just going through and then suddenly like there's like a, whatever you call them on there, a reel or I don't know what they
Yeah.
call them on there, a
Really,
clip
yeah.
short. And it's me. I'm like, I didn't make that. Somebody else made that. It's like, that's really nice. It's weird when you like, do this stuff and you like see your face suddenly pop up. It's like, well, the heck, who's that guy? Um, but I love the fact, like we had somebody, even just reposting what we post with your own thoughts and stuff to your
Yeah.
audience is a minimum step. Not everybody even does that. Like I just had one that kind of, they had quite a lot of engagement on it, and they had some additional insights, and so that's great. That's good for us because it gives us more exposure, but also it's for you. It's like it's your content. Technically, you're the one that's created it. But doing what you're doing, even taking it beyond that, and actually, finding different ways to post it in other property. We do some of that, but you can do a lot more of that because every week we have to go to the next. But we try to do at least 1 or 2 clips from every episode ourselves. And
Yeah. Those are great
one of
clips, by the way.
thanks. And yeah, I don't even do it. Like my VA's, she's been working with me for 5 years. She's awesome at it. Thanks. And but that's something I think. Well, I was talking to somebody that I don't know where they got their information, but anyway, but we're talking about how a lot of our audience as a podcast, there's a lot of people that are fans of the show, but they only watch clips, right? They don't necessarily listen to all the episodes or on Spotify or wherever, but they just see it on social media and they consume our clips, and that's part of the audience, and a large part. I think he was talking to somebody at a large podcast that said most of our audience is just on social media watching our clips, or YouTube or wherever, watching
Yeah, I
clips.
was I
So
was on a podcast on Monday, and basically it was a woman has 100,000 followers on Snapchat and TikTok and goes live, and the podcast is basically a live Snapchat and TikTok live. And so
yeah,
her 100,000 people were watching our podcast interview live. And then after it's recorded, she does record it, then she puts it on YouTube as well a couple of weeks later. That hasn't come out yet, but so I'm in front of 100,000. Well, I mean, potentially 100,000, but of course, not everyone's online at the
yeah,
same time. So maybe it's a fraction of 1,000 people or something, but still great. There's a huge
yeah.
visibility addition there.
Yeah, there's so many things, even as a podcast host out there, like there's so much more you can do. I love hearing even when some people have a dedicated page on their website where they put all their interviews.
Yep.
I have that. I'm actually on my site, but that's another, you put it out there or
Yeah.
send it out in an email or whatever. But yeah, good stuff. But yeah, I really, I'm excited to hear, how this project turns out.
Yeah, we should
Um,
come back on in 3 or 4 months,
yeah.
and talk about the end result and how many people have subscribed and so on.
Yeah. And the next ideas you have.
Yeah,
So, well, thanks a lot, Joel. It's always fun talking to you.
yeah.
Congratulations on the 6th episode. It was a
Thank
good
you.
one. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Builders Podcast. One more quick note about our sponsors. At Unified Web Design, we're passionate about doing better together, partnering with agencies and businesses to deliver exceptional web design, development, and ongoing support. And UnifiedLabs.ai is where we explore smart, practical ways to integrate AI directly into your website and e-commerce flows. From intelligent chatbots to marketing automation to back-end reporting, all with a strong focus on user experience and making your systems work smarter. If you haven't already, subscribe or follow to stay updated on future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, sharing it with someone who might benefit helps us grow this amazing community. Until next time, keep building smarter, bolder, and with purpose.